We would show them a good example. We would show them a weak example and talk about what was missing in the weak example. And I think that was some of the best teaching that happened in my classroom
That,
was
but
when
it really is about, with writing, it's about the journey. And so sometimes you want to focus on that and just make that what you grade for. And even in the assignment, let's be sure you have these three things. It's over time.
I think that there's too much emphasis put on grading. I mean, when I was teaching, a lot of that emphasis came from the parent.
Hello, I'm Matthew Stevens, founder, CEO, and teacher here at Essentials in Writing. I'm here today to introduce our very first episode of a video series called Teacher Talk. In the Teacher Talk video series, we will be addressing all kinds of topics that parents submit to us about writing. In this particular video, episode number 1, we are going to be discussing how do I grade writing. Enjoy. All right. Hello, Stacy. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be talking about scoring. This has probably been, since I've been in the homeschool market, this has probably been one of the most common questions that I get about challenges that homeschoolers face is, how do I grade writing? And I think it really comes down, I know probably for you as well, when I first became an educator and started teaching middle school English and writing, I found it to be difficult because, you know where every student's level of writing is at.
Right.
And for this student, this particular student that you're working with, he's come a long way. So this is an A for him because he's really worked hard and has done really, really well. And yet you have this fabulous writer that you pull up next, and you see the work that student has given you, and you realize that this is not excellent for this student. So that all comes down to the word that writing is subjective. I mean, did you experience the same thing?
I did. And as a new kind of naive teacher, it took me a while to get past where every student kind of had to do the same thing or be expected to do the same thing. But once I was able to move past that and realize and, take students as individuals, which I think in homeschooling, it should be much easier to do that. But with that, you have to accept their weaknesses and
Mhm.
challenge their strengths. So
Mhm.
I did finally start to, grade, like you said, the student who's an excellent writer but turns in something subpar, I would
Mhm.
grade for that because I know that student.
Mhm.
And the same for the student who struggles, I would grade for improvement.
Mhm.
Definitely. That student deserves an A just as much as the next
Mhm.
person. So,
Mhm. Yes, and one of the questions that parents have regarding that, the way that you're describing that is, well, I don't teach writing, so I don't even know what is good or what is bad for my student or whatever. And so I wanted to kind of bring some attention to the samples that we provide in the curriculum. So, with Essentials in Writing, we're providing with every step of the writing process, we're modeling it on the board, or I'm modeling it on the board. And then we're including that particular model in the parent teacher handbook in the answer key portion. And then, like for high school levels, we're providing them with a sample of quality writing, a quality essay, and then an ineffective essay. And so I want to talk just a little bit about how parents can use the the writing samples that are in Essentials in Writing to compare to. Because as you just mentioned, you have a student who struggles and then you have a student who excels, and you want to grade that student's work for what they've completed based on what they can do. And
right.
the great thing obviously about homeschooling is that you're pretty in tune with what your student is capable of. And
Sure.
so whenever when you use a sample of writing, the goal is to look at it from a general perspective, and I want to get your take on this as well, is, what does it look like first? Does it have a beginning, middle, and end? And then, how are the paragraphs beginning, or how is each section beginning, depending on what the student is writing? And then use that as a guide to compare to, because what we're trying to do is provide parents with an example of what would be appropriate for that particular writing assignment for that level. Is there anything that you can add to that, like how you would use a writing sample to grade two?
Yeah. Do you remember when we were teaching together how we would show our students samples of writing? We would show them a good example. We would show them a weak example and talk about what was missing in the weak example. And I think that was some of the best teaching that happened in my classroom, was when they were able to actually see, because you can talk it and talk it and talk it, but until they see an example. So
Yeah.
I think parents would be a step ahead to use those examples with their students, show them to them.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, some parents that have talked to me about this are afraid to do that because they feel like that in some way that's cheating, or, they don't want to teach their kids bad habits. But when it comes to writing, the best way to be an excellent writer is to look at good writing and read it.
Right,
And
right.
obviously, that's why I model the lessons in Essentials in Writing, is because I'm modeling the thought process. I'm modeling the way we get our thoughts from our brain onto paper, organize it properly, and then communicate it. And so I think that's a great idea, just
Yeah.
using those examples straight from the book. And they can even look at them ahead of time.
Yeah. And sometimes a struggling student who just kind of recreates what you modeled for them or what you showed them, that's their first step in making
Mhm,
some improvement. So it's okay. It's
mhm,
okay.
absolutely. When it comes to actually grading a piece of writing, let's say sixth grade and up, where their compositions are a little bit longer and there's a lot more steps that are involved, etc. Some
Right.
parents feel a little bit challenged and sometimes even frustrated that, what do I grade for? What am I really trying to determine and look at? So that's why we provide the checklists within the assignments at the end, so you
Right.
can see, like, hey, here's what should be included in this composition. And then of course the sample writing, which is in the answer key for each individual lesson up to the final one. And then we provide rubrics for level 7 and up, because we want students to begin getting used to the fact that they may be scored this way as well. But I
Exactly.
wanted to bring some attention. I'm going to share a few examples of things that I have done in the past. Sometimes I would get to a place in public education when I was teaching that I didn't have time to grade every essay every single time, because there was a lot of things going on. We were teaching a lot of different things. And so sometimes I would just say, I'm going to be sure that in this particular essay, let's say for 7th grade, that these students have a really good thesis statement, and then they have paragraphs that generally can support that thesis statement.
Mhm.
And that would be all I would grade for. They
Mhm.
may use the word "the" way too many times, and they may start every opening sentence and every sentence, for that matter, in the entire essay with the same word. And I really wanted to fix that. But it really is about, with writing, it's about the journey. And so sometimes you want to focus on that and just make that what you grade for. And even in the assignment, let's be sure you have these three things, and let that be, obviously less work for you as a parent or the teacher to have to
Right.
grade so much, because yeah, we do want students to get to the place where they can do it all correctly, but that doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time.
And I think too, you can say, like you said, you're grading for the thesis, the supporting paragraphs, and that kind of thing. But when you, so that's what you're grading for, but you could provide feedback about some of those other things that, I noticed that you started a lot of your sentences with the same word.
Mhm.
Next time, try to choose a variety of sentence starters. So you could address that just in some feedback, but it doesn't really play into the grade.
Absolutely. Yeah, we know that, most homeschool families do have to submit their grades, to the state, or I don't know how it works for every single state, but so they do have to have some grades. But I want to kind of just come back and touch on what you mentioned about using something to give a little bit of feedback. Essentials in Writing's our goal is to create the easiest process for parents to teach writing, and the easiest process for the students to be able to learn to write, and to learn to write well, by looking at models that we do, breaking the lessons into bite-sized pieces, and repeating that process over and over and over and over,
Right.
level after level after level after level. But I think what's important is that parents, some parents will come to me and say, well, my student never capitalizes the proper nouns, and that drives me crazy. So my encouragement to them is that's always something that you can have that conversation about. It doesn't have to necessarily count in on the grade,
Mhm.
but it can be something that you say, I'm not going to grade this until you fix all your proper nouns.
Right.
And the student is learning through that, and the parent in that case doesn't have to feel like, well, I don't know what to teach. Proper nouns are important to me, I want them all capitalized. Then you
Mhm.
can let that be the focus, but then you can also just take a smaller portion of, like, does this have a clear beginning, middle, and end? Does this paragraph have an opening sentence and a closing sentence? And you
Right.
can look at the samples to compare to see if it looks similar or not. But grading and feedback, to me, I was like you. I tried to do it all and tried to make everybody the same, and I just learned very quickly in my teaching career that that wasn't going to work, and it hasn't ever worked since. So I've stuck to just these ideas that we're talking about. What else? Tell me a little bit more. Do you have any other experiences that you want to share just about grading that you think would be
Um,
helpful for parents?
I think that there's too much emphasis put on grading. I mean, when I was teaching, a lot of that emphasis came from the parent. So at home, I would encourage not to put too much emphasis on the grade. Yes, there needs to be accountability, and yes, you're going to possibly have to turn that in
Mm,
to the state or whatever. But um, grades should help motivate, not
mhm,
make a kid feel down.
mhm.
And if they rely on that grade for their motivation, that's an extrinsic motivator. They need something internal that motivates them. And so I think a lot of it is just in how you phrase it, instead of telling your kid, you need to do this or you have to do this instead. I think Mrs. York, she wrote a blog about this. You say, like, this is what you're going to learn while we do this. And
Mhm,
just the change in your language
mhm.
makes it so much more receptive to the student, and
Yes.
just feeling more like a partner with them in
Mm,
what they're doing, and not using that grade to be like, I gotcha,
right.
or yay, you're so fantastic, because the student that always gets the good grade becomes less and less motivated by that grade
Mhm, mhm.
too,
Yeah, yeah.
so I think we have to be careful about motivating our students, keeping them motivated. A lot of students who use essentials and writers are reluctant writers.
Mhm.
And so I think definitely grade on improvement that we see,
Yes,
things like that, instead of you can
yes.
use that rubric, but you can do other things. You can add things to it, like for the really good writer, you could add a part that's about style, and things
Yes.
like that, where the struggling writer, you're going to be more use more of a formula about how you
Mm.
grade. It'll be a little more mechanical.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I can't stress enough about that. Writing is about the process. It's about the repetition and practicing at it to get better and better and better. Some parents will question and say, this seems like there's a lot of repetition in essentials in writing. And I said, yes, it's exactly, we're doing it because we want there to come this point where the student says, I know how to plan this essay. I know what to do. I've done a million of these. So
Right.
I always use the baking recipe. I can't help it. But after you've baked those cookies 20 times, you can do it from memory because you know exactly what needs to go in there. You know how much, you know the time to bake it. Everything works perfectly. And those cookies always turn out really well. So I hope that
And you
parents,
do bake really good cookies, by
I
the
do.
way.
And I just want parents to really take away from this topic that we're discussing here for teacher talk is that we're here to encourage parents to not stress. I mean, I've been saying that the whole time I've been in education, in homeschool education, is that parents just put a lot of weight on themselves. And so
Sure.
hopefully this brings a little bit to light that grading and scoring is really not as high on the list as maybe that a lot of people have put it, and we don't have to worry too much about it. You do have to have those grades and you've got to use them however, but ultimately that repetition and just simply doing it over and over is what will be more beneficial than anything. So
I agree. I think it should be one very small component of your entire homeschool program, just one small component of it. And a student can do, you can rescore it. You can allow them to have time to make improvements and rescore it. That's also beneficial.
yeah, and all of that can be based on how much time you have.
Right.
Because I mean, there were times that I would just grade, I'm just grading for thesis and 3 body paragraphs, and that was done. And then other times I had extra time and I would go through and give lots of quality feedback and, ask them to change things and resubmit it to me. All of those things. It was a good experience. I think that it prepared me very well to help parents with scoring once I moved into the private sector and work with people who are homeschooling their kiddos, and yeah, share some of that I learned in my time in education. And nobody was really saying much to me about it. But so I just want to say as we close out today that I'm very grateful to our homeschool parents. And I hope that this episode of Teacher Talk has brought a little bit of clarity to you about scoring. And please be sure to, whatever platform you're watching this video on, to post in the comments and let us know what other topics would you like us to cover, because we're here to help you.